I'm Noreen. Welcome to Voices of the Erased, where I share information related to the loving bonds of children and parents being erased and the consequences of this trauma. Today's question for part 2 of our 3-part series on chapter 3 is that some will say parental alienation is junk science. However, after part 2, comment on how PA is actually from good or legit science. So, picking back up on page 32 of Parents Acting Badly, scientists test research questions while using a wide variety of methods. 3 of the most commonly used are experimental, correlational, and qualitative methods. Experiments are the gold standard of research methods. That's the first of the 3. Particularly randomized and controlled experiments. The method also allows researchers to show cause and effect because they control for all factors in the study except for the factor they think is going to cause an outcome. For example, if we think a particular drug causes aggression, we would conduct an experiment and randomly assign people to receive the drug or not. We would also hold everything else constant, like have participants take the drug in the same study environment, like in a lab. Although such experiments are the ideal and preferred form of research because it's the only method that can demonstrate cause and effect, they're not always feasible or ethical to conduct. So, for example, if we want to know whether court involvement causes increases in parental alienating behaviors, it is absolutely, it's not ethical to randomly send some parents to courthouse to file various motions and have others that to not do that. It would also not be ethical to randomly assign children to join a family where alienation is happening versus where it's not, and then see what happens to their mental health. Yeah, not good. Next, we have correlational and qualitative studies, and they're among the more feasible to conduct when researching topics like PA, because the purpose is to explore and demonstrate that there are relationships between certain variables and not others. So correlational studies, they typically entail surveying people about their personal traits, attitudes, and or experiences. This method can demonstrate not just whether relationships exist between factors, but also the strength of those relationships. If we are only wanting to explore whether certain relationships exist, such as whether the age of the child at the time of the divorce is related to how severe their alienation was, we can survey adult children of divorced families about these factors and see if they are significantly associated. We can also test whether certain factors predict specific outcomes. We can even measure people over a series of time points to see whether specific factors consistently predict outcomes over time. When we show that patterns of predictors and outcomes occur consistently over time, we can have confidence that one may be causing the other. Now, qualitative studies. These use a large number of methods, such as content analysis of written texts, like case studies, legal records, analysis of focus group or interview transcripts, interpretation of case history data. While these methods cannot show cause and effect, they can show, like in a correlational study, whether relationships between certain factors do exist. These types of studies are largely exploratory, as the researchers are often hoping to learn what the participants' experiences have been like in their samples. Based on the factors identified in these methods, the researcher then starts developing the why questions that can be tested with empirical research methods. either correlational or experimental. So now let's take a look at the sampling problem. If you're following in your book, I'm on page 35. Finding people to study is an important limitation for almost all kinds of research. Ideally, you want the people you study to be more representative of everyone like them. So if we are studying targets of PA, we would hope to get a sample of people who are very similar to all targets of PA. If we wanted to see how alienated children are affected, we would want the sample we select to resemble all alienated children. This task can be challenging to accomplish given that there have not yet been a large enough studies on this topic to clarify exactly who is vulnerable to the problem. We know PA largely affects divorced and separated families, but we have also learned that it can happen in families that are together as well. But at what proportion? What proportion of targeted and alienating parents are the step parents? There's a good question. There is much we need to know yet in order to know exactly who we need to sample. When a researcher has to recruit participants for PA studies, another issue is where to find them. A significant proportion of descriptive research on PA so far has been representative of the extreme or severe cases because they represent the experiences of parents who have been presenting themselves to clinicians or to the judicial system for help. This sampling problem means that the adults cannot be generalized well to other target parents experiencing mild forms of PA or those who have sought help. This issue is not unique to PA, as many studies on domestic violence have sampled women or men who have sought out services in cases of severe physical abuse. Those not seeking services, they're not represented. While the moderate to severe cases will be of interest to legal and mental health professionals, we are also interested in the whole system or the whole spectrum of alienating behaviors and how this not so innocent game may affect real children's lives. Not to mention the lives of the parents who are being kept from an emotional and or physical distance from their own children. Although our research team was one of the first to pull a representative sample of parents, our findings need to be replicated in other states and across nations to determine whether the 9% prevalence rate of adults, 13% of parents, is really accurate. While we do have good representative data on domestic violence, there has not yet been a larger scale survey using a nationally representative sample of adults to assess actual prevalence of PA behaviors in the general public. Such a project is expensive, ranging from $7,000 to $15,000, and is something we are in the process of pursuing. Obtaining accurate prevalence estimates for PA is an important first step in addressing this problem. This concludes part 2 of part 3, and in the section below, comment on how PA is actually based on good or legitimate science. What are your thoughts and experiences? Thank you. See you soon for part 3.